sure you guys are set right. Let's go.
He's here. He's out to.
City planner pro
For baseball?
City planner pro
See, what we get on TV is what Channel 16 is sending out. So
Oh, okay.
that way.
Well, he's got a mayor pro tem.
Oh.
Serves,
Yes, city got
he's serving instead of the city planner.
Oh, is that right?
Find us.
Visual aids.
That'd be on your drawers.
They may win that.
Oh, I think you're right. We have the zoning code.
Dirty old man.
I didn't say which.
Just leave that. That's all right.
Knows me pretty well.
Well,
Who is it?
ladies new.
Thank you.
I don't do handouts
I
anymore.
know, well,
You're all online.
She's not
Married
who?
Larry Huff.
my,
Yeah.
I wonder if she's.
I don't even.
yeah.
Your father
They
Them off.
I'm still old fashioned.
I don't think she's from around.
Maybe not.
I don't think she's from around here at all.
She's a cheerleader at Michigan.
How you doing, sir?
How are you?
Yep, that's me.
Yes, I'm all right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
These can just go to the desk.
You sure you don't want to leave
Okay.
Matthew for
Because they can
today?
use them next.
Water, we can update those or something.
Okay.
Maybe.
Seems like a lot often you try like zoning districts.
That's a good one. Yeah. Thank you.
So you don't want us to look at it?
No. Tonight, then put it in the jar.
Oh, okay. Study it at home.
When he was on the council,
No, don't take it.
he was in the neighborhood, his mother lives across the
Oh, don't
street.
take
Put it in the dustbin.
Okay.
I'll get you straight. Well, your keeper's not here. That's what's wrong with me.
Yeah. She's got to go to that
I know.
I know where she's going. She's going to
Prayer thing.
Green.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Are you going after?
I guess.
Well, if there's enough.
I was supposed to
How
be
long do
there.
you think it'll last?
District. Then who would they go play?
The girls will probably play union.
This might last till 6.
Well, that's one game.
Possibility.
How's the girls been?
Could last a while.
Pretty good.
But they played.
I'll have that. So they're pretty good.
Hey, after Judy, that don't matter. It don't matter.
I don't know who the boy is, but I would say probably. I couldn't tell. That'd be the railroad edition.
Like Maryland Langston.
The world is downtown's beginning.
This is Lee, what is this, Lee?
Oh, that's down by,
And where
That's
is
by the high school.
yeah, that's over by the high school.
That's the old railroad edition.
10th and Mason.
I know, but, well, I've never seen it.
Briscoe Railroad?
I'll just put that out, put that, and go down below. There we go.
what do you got?
I just, before I came here, there's 5 people. 4.
They still playing Wayne.
Yeah, I think I
You'd
read.
have to-
Let me see. I think I read them all.
5:15.
Yep. I was kind of happy about that one. That Rob Hobart.
I haven't
Maryland.
Huh?
that Eclipse, that
Hey, it makes money.
comic book and
Yeah, he's
the video games, I guess.
Yeah. But he's
I don't know. Video games.
intelligent.
must be making some money.
Let me look.
Yeah.
You could have read Jamie.
I miscounted, she could have had it.
She could probably go back to her seat if she wanted to.
Yeah. I miscounted.
Next meeting.
They've already got the names changed.
I'll get you over there.
I don't have any particular affinity for that
Yeah,
seat.
it really
It's
is
just
like
where I
that.
sit.
I don't want to offend you for.
This is a new perspective.
There you go. That's right. Get to do it.
Learning perspective.
That's right. I feel lawyerly here.
Still on. There you go. He's not late. Yeah.
He ain't found the seat yet.
Howdy, howdy.
to give her a good look. Damn, you're doing good.
You're doing good. You're early, man.
Well, I don't know. I wonder about Janice.
Joe asked me to do this, and I realized she's never.
You didn't put that in the
Wait a minute.
priorities.
They've got to write that down in the little thing about what your responsibilities are now. You gotta stay awake.
Visibly.
Visibly awake. When I'm coming over here, two ladies with a sign, walking down the street with a sign, but I couldn't read it. I don't know what it was. They didn't find it. Well, I understand. Yeah.
Sure.
But if you're being honest. Welcome.
Thank you.
Really? I agree.
It's on me. Here, you want?
No, I got it. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm at.
Good luck.
One next to it. There's some marathon. Here we go. My son-in-law planes. All the hallucinogenic stuff. But only my little bit of it.
Yeah, really.
He said
Late now.
it doesn't make sense.
Unless you can pick up.
No,
I gotta go.
Gotta go, gotta go.
and then he said, rubbing on it, put it in.
Really?
This one's been doing it good all these years. Everyone stick with it. Look at a good thing. Why not?
Pickle bucket thing on that Thursday. And it was, I've seen St. Creek High, but I've never seen, it was good. They closed it.
How you doing, sir?
I just closed at Jack's Fork too.
You know,
Yeah, they, actually, there's some kayakers there. I don't know whether or not.
always in the way. I like that.
Left over them, you know, catches and all that. So you can't get out of it. I don't care how good a swimmer you are.
I used to drink those things. They were different.
This map is in here.
The reason they brought the map.
Well, they probably figured kayakers, they just
I didn't really know.
got into something more than they should.
Hi,
That's a pretty good story.
Jody, I'm Denise
They
Martin.
keep updating every 3 months, but I think keep it here. It's great.
She's early too.
Are we supposed to start? I mean, I'm here now.
Really, now we can start.
We're waiting on you.
Count it down.
I actually got 3 minutes to spare.
I gotta talk about smoking.
I mean, I don't care.
I have a feeling.
I don't care. Well, we're probably live now.
By that time, it's gonna be working in the yard. Well, that's
So, whatever you all say.
I went up to Phil's Honey Bank in Trips for next year. 9 o'clock in the morning, they're offering Bloody Marys and mimosas.
Oh, yeah, Jim told me that. They went.
I can never think of Jim. He goes,
So did Fidelity 6 sell out? No.
They're definitely going on
it's part of
a stampede.
and Cable One.
They bought it. They already own it. So they were going to do the counting.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll see if you're ready.
And you left with the other gig over at the other radio station?
Yeah.
Okay. If I can have your attention, we'll call the May 2019 City of Rolla Planning and Zoning meeting to order. First item is you should have received an agenda and one that was posted. Any changes as proposed? If not, we'll follow it as printed and distributed. The first item on the agenda is approve the minutes. We had 6 pages that Madeline and Karen excellently did. We made one correction on a name change, and we made one small change from what you received in the mail or online. So any other additions or, corrections? If not, we'll rule those approved as printed and distributed. Next item, Mr. Flowers. The first thing, we want to welcome Mr. Flowers. He's a Community Development Director. And John Butts, who's the city administrator and I guess city planner pro tem. If he'd find us a new city planner, then you guys wouldn't have to do two jobs. And we also like to welcome Jody Eberly. She's the new council rep appointed by the mayor and voted on by her fellow councilmen. Evidently, Matt Kroll is new mayor pro tem, I think. So, welcome, Jody. We appreciate your service. Next item is report on city council actions. We had 5 of them. Mr. Flowers?
Okay, thank you. Again, welcome, everybody. We haven't had a P&Z meeting for quite a while now. I don't know if it's just our good luck or what since James left. So I don't know that I'm going to go into as much detail on these cases as what our previous planner did, but I'm going to try to present them as best I can. If you've got any questions, you're free to ask. The first report on the council actions was there was a request to rezone a lot from RR to C3, and it was the inter-county electric request. They actually had a first reading at City Council, and it met some opposition. So I think the next day they withdrew that request. So that never did come to a vote. The second was a request to name the west end of 12th Street from 12th Street to Fitch Street. And on February 19th, the City Council conducted a final reading of this ordinance, and the ordinance passed 10-1, and there was 1 absentee on the City Council. The third was a request to approve the final plat of Cottonwood Drive. That's out there where the Dollar General store is going, and it was approved unanimously. The fourth item was a request to approve the final plat of Joyner Acres, and that was approved unanimously. And the fifth one was a request to vacate the entire alley that connected Rolla Street to the northeastern end of Houston Road. And there was a first reading and the ordinance, and second reading, and the ordinance was passed, and it was approved unanimously also. So, any questions on those approvals?
Any questions? Not? Thank you. Next item we have is public hearings. We have 2 of them tonight. The first is a request to rezone lots 5 through 8, block 19, at 601 East 10th Street from multi-family zoning R3 to office zoning district CO. Mr. Flowers.
Yes. And my administrative assistant said I could do a PowerPoint real easy, but that's kind of hard to teach old dog new tricks. So I know the overhead works, so I'm going to use it tonight if you don't mind. Yes, this is a request to rezone lots 5 through 8 of Block 19 Holloway FRC, which is currently configured as a parcel identified with the Phelps County Assessor. Account number is 6652, and the address is 601 East 10th Street. From the multifamily R3 district to office zoning district. The applicant and the agent is Allergy and Asthma Consultants who own the property. The subject parcel is approximately 0.58 acres in size. The subject parcel is approximately 255 foot deep and 100 foot wide. According to our GIS map. There is no structure on the parcel and is currently vacant. All area requirements for office zoning CO are met. That minimum lot size, maximum lot coverage, and everything will be met in order to get it permitted. The future land use map, or flume designation of the subject parcel, shows the front part of the parcel along 10th Street as commercial office, or that would be these two areas here. And the back of it along 11th Street shows as high-density residential. It's when you're going from R3 to CO, some might think that that's, you're going from residential to commercial, that may be a more intense zone, but when you're actually going from R3 to the CO, it's actually really less intense because of what they can actually do with it. The applicant proposes to amend the zoning map in a way that would locate this all into commercial office so they can expand their business. Their business actually across Maple Street, and they're wanting to maybe construct something and add on to that business, like I said. There were no protests or petitions, but there was one concerned email that was sent, and I included them in your packet. And the concern was the water problem. This lot sits fairly low. It catches a lot of the runoff. There was some concern that there might be a spring on it or a low water table. Staff actually went out, walked the lot, walked around. It didn't seem, right now it's soft because we've had a lot of rain, but it didn't appear to have any type of a spring or anything on it. In our DRC meeting, I actually brought it up to our city engineer because we do not have development plans on this yet. And actually, they wouldn't want to spend money on development plans, until they got the zoning approved. But there is a stormwater sewer inlet on that lot, and when I talked to the city engineer, and they said if and when they decide to develop this lot, they will be responsible to take care of all the surface water that's on that lot, and they will be required to tie into that storm sewer to take care of that. So, like I said, no other protest petitions have been filed, and the action required for Planning Zoning Commission is to recommend to City Council approval, denial, or conditional approval of this zone, and I'll try to answer any questions.
Any questions from commissioners?
Steve, you don't think there was ever any building on any of this, do you?
We have no record of that. I have no record of it ever having a building on it.
So, Steve, on the map, what's the yellow piece in the middle between the two sections?
At one time, that was a alley, and it's been vacated.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll officially open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak should come forward, state your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes, and try not to repeat what someone else has said before.
I'm Barbara Wilkins. I live at 102 West 14th Street. I represent Spring Properties LLC. We own and manage the adjacent property at 604 East 11th. I'm the one who brought up the water concern. My other concern is going to be light and traffic. I do have a duplex that is right next door to that property. I am very responsible on the people that I rent to, and I want to make sure that they will not be disturbed by either light or traffic from that property. So I would ask that you have a condition that they have a significant privacy fence that will protect my residents from any disturbance from that construction. The person who has some knowledge about that property isn't here this evening, to the best of my knowledge. There's an older couple who live across the street, and they've told me in the past that an old store that was up the street from where the high school is now, that the owner used to have a garden on that lot and that he never had to water it, and she was talking about in the 40s. So I don't know the details of that, but I know that there is a significant water issue there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward.
Hi there. My name's Michael Sulzer. I live at 420 East 11th, which is just across the corner from the 4 lots. I had never seen that map before that showed some lots being blue and some being green. The only thing that we were concerned about is 2 things. One, the parking. I don't know where the parking will be for the businesses because we had never seen that lot. So just as long as they're, maybe the 2 lots that are in back, if if a parking lot goes there, then they won't take up street parking, which we need. And then the second one is construction. We've got a baby due, and so if the lot's approved for, excuse me, if it's approved for construction, and it happens to be on the time when our baby is born, and the newborn is going to be restless, and that loud construction might, like she was alluding to, some sort of privacy fence or some way to keep the noise down so that others won't be bothered by it. But that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak this issue, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll officially close the public hearing. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Steve,
Yes.
in regard to a privacy fence, is there some kind of buffering between C0 and R3?
No.
There is not.
As far as parking and lighting, I think the football lights would be more of a,
Well,
because it's right across the street, but,
As far as the parking, our ordinances mandate the amount of on-street parking that they're required to have by the size of their building. So they'll be required to meet the parking regulations.
they also own the property across the street, which seems like ample parking. I think, don't they own the property to the west of this?
They do. But this will be a totally separate building,
Yeah,
so
I understand that.
they'll have to do their own parking.
The water issue will be dealt with in the next phase of it, right? If they build something?
When they present the development plans, and they submit the plans, then we'll look at the water runoff and make sure it meets, that always goes through our engineering department, and they make sure that it meets the requirements for taking care of their on-site water, yes.
Any other questions, comments? I'd entertain a motion.
Make the motion, we send this to the city council with our approval.
Motion by Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Shields, Monty Shields, seconded. Any other discussion or comments before we vote? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Eberly,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Monty Shields,
Yes.
Stephen Shields.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item we have a public hearing on is an ordinance amending Chapter 42, Article 3 regarding the medical marijuana. Our goal for the recommendations for amending our Chapter 42 is really quite simple, and I propose we keep it that way. We are only dealing with the recommendations for medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana. Unless commissioners request otherwise, we will limit our discussions and public hearing tonight to medical marijuana. Is that agreeable with the other is not even our concern or our responsibility, actually. The city council visited this issue a week ago on Monday, May 6th, and they will have a public hearing next Monday, the 20th, with final decisions possible that night or after a second reading on June 3rd. We usually visit issues first, but it really doesn't matter if their public hearing and vote is after ours. State statutes and city ordinance require our participation and recommendations. Evidently, timely adoption was necessary. Without any further ado, Mr. Butts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Planning and Zoning Commission. So I didn't have the heart to dumped this on Steve Flowers in James's absence, so I.
We appreciate you coming and visit us, so.
Thank you. I did put a written summary that was distributed with your agenda. It was very comparable to what I gave the City Council this past Monday. But rather going over that, I prepared a little bit of a PowerPoint because I thought there might be some folks in the audience in particular that would be interested in hearing maybe a bit more background on what the medical marijuana and Amendment 2 is really about. So we'll really sort of walk through that, and then we'll end with the draft ordinance that has lots of elements that I think the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council have the ability to modify and retrofit. So I wanted to start off a little bit. This report was really taken from a report that Jack Cardetti did last Monday. Jack Cardetti from St. James, many of you may know him, actually helped coordinate the statewide campaign to pass Amendment 2, and so he was called in last week to sort of be a bit of an expert on what Amendment 2 is and what it isn't. So just in summary, Amendment 2, which is, of course, the medical marijuana amendment that was passed last November, passed by approaching 70% statewide and at 59% in Phelps County. It allows qualified patients with debilitating medical conditions to use medical marijuana under the supervision of their doctors. That means by prescription or certification by their physician. It creates actually 4 business classifications that we address in our draft ordinance, but really only one's going to be most likely relevant. Nevertheless, our regulations have to address facilities for cultivation, manufacturing, dispensing of medical marijuana, which is probably the lightning rod issue, and infused product manufacturing. All of this is being promulgated and monitored and managed by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. They're actually in the process of rolling out the regulations, and we don't have final regs yet from the state, but the timeline for applications and approvals are all coming up this fall and winter. What it does not do. So this does not legalize marijuana. We got into a side conversation at Monday's City Council meeting on decriminalizing, and I think that's drawn extra perhaps attention to this. But as the chairman indicated, this tonight is a text amendment dealing with the medical marijuana issues and really doesn't address anything of the other elements. The expectation is that 2 to 3% of the population will be a qualifying patient, so eligible in the state of Missouri. This is not broken out by county or by city, but that's the numbers that the state of Missouri is based on other states' experiences, would anticipate being able to get this prescription. In Missouri, it's going to be a heavily regulated, so there's 32 other states that have already passed medical marijuana. Missouri is always conservative. We also take time to learn what others have done well and learn from what they don't do well. And so Missouri is entering into a very regulated industry on the medical marijuana side, and they say literally it would be tracking from the seed to the actual growth, manufacturing, distribution, and consumption. It'll be managed that tightly through a statewide tracking system. In Missouri, they're estimating dispensaries. I've actually heard 2 numbers, one for every 20,000 resident and one for every 32,000 residents, so those are just averages. So Rolla, that's 20,000 people. You might think one dispensary. Realistically, we're probably going to be serving the Phelps County market and perhaps some of the areas around us. It's not likely that we would see some of these dispensaries go into very small markets. So realistically, we might see 2, maybe even 3 dispensaries in Rolla as a medical marijuana facility. But the market will ultimately dictate that. The state is capped to no more than 24 dispensary licenses in each congressional district. So the 8th district, Representative Smith's district, which runs from Cape Girardeau really to Rolla, there could be no more than 24 dispensaries, and that's the cap that the state can issue. The timeline approved in November. This took effect in January, or actually December. The key dates on here, they're going to begin taking applications for patient caregiver ID applications in July. August, they're going to begin taking the applications for the licensing, and they have to have those approved by the end of the year so that those businesses can begin to roll out their business models and practices in the early part of 2020. So prior to the application, which is due August 3rd, the first applications, that application has to include specific documentation that they have the property secured. So that application will be very specific to a site, and therefore us having our regulations a couple of months in advance of that will give those applicants at least assurances of the kind of areas that Rolla is, from a zoning standpoint, going to allow. So this is the actual wording of the constitutional amendment that we approved last November. I highlighted, I think, some of the key words that are worth touching on here. certainly take time to read it all, but unless all allowed by the local government, these facilities shall not be initially sited within 1,000 feet of any then existing elementary or secondary school, child care center, or church. So it's a very unusual wording in the text in that it establishes a 1,000-foot limit and allows local government to reduce that boundary. No local government shall prohibit any of those facilities or through the enactment of ordinances or regulations that make their operations unduly burdensome. Now, that's a little vague, that's legal speak, but that's really saying that in essence you can't zone out these kinds of things. The market's going to have a reasonable expectation where this type of dispensary in particular would be able to operate in your community. It goes on to say again that the cities can govern time, place, and manner of operation. So that does still put a lot of discretion in our hands in City Council Planning and Zoning as to how these things are going to be run in the city of Rolla. Some key points on local government's role. We've touched on a little bit of this, but local government may not ban medical marijuana facilities. That was specific in the constitutional amendment, nor can we create an undue burden. There's, again, one dispensary for approximately every 32,000 Missourians. We think 2 to 3 is likely in Rolla. Dispensaries will be some of the most secure buildings in the city. Now, why is that? In order to walk into the door of the dispensary, so once you enter it, you have to be able to demonstrate that you have a certificate for a prescription or that you are a certificated caregiver. The public cannot walk into the dispensary. It'll be a very controlled, regulated area with a scanning system, all as a part of this. And so it's a considerable investment to meet these standards of the state. So there's been some talk where they might be. These aren't going to be able to be a part of an existing pharmacy or a part of an existing retail store or the back half of a retail store. This will be a standalone secured facility for that practice only. And lastly, as I said, Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, they've stated in their rules and the way they're approaching that, that patient access should be a priority for local communities. So the real issue that I think we're going to be grappling with over the next couple of weeks as we sort of address this draft regulation is this 1,000-foot limit. And we had the authority to stay with 1,000 foot and we had the authority to do less. Cities are really just now rolling out what they're proposing. Warrensburg was one of the first ones, and interestingly enough, did it very early. And I don't think that they heard from any of the rest of the state as to reducing the limit. They stayed with 1,000. It's about the only one that I've heard of that's actively pursuing the 1,000. Many of them are looking at 0 setbacks, 300-foot setbacks, but quite frankly, it can be anywhere between 0 and 1,000. And every community is going to have to address that. The 1,000 makes sense if you think of larger urban centers where you have large areas. That probably applies less the smaller the community becomes. I wanted to touch on, and I know that you all know these zoning classifications, but I didn't know that necessarily the public or the folks that are attending here tonight fully understand what our zoning districts are all about. And when we talk about placement of these facilities, I think it's worth touching on those. So real quickly, I just want to review our CO, our commercial office. It's the office district. It's our most conservative district. As you heard Steve talk about earlier, it allows for things like professional offices, studios, private lessons, administrative offices, etc. The next higher up commercial category is our C1 neighborhood business district. It has some permitted uses by right, things like shops, banks, restaurants, coffee shops, churches, etc., and then some by conditional use. Conditional uses means that they are a separate public hearing process and we can impose conditions on them, things like pharmacies, grocery stores, hardware stores. C2 is our general retail district. Permitted uses would be anything allowed in a CO or a C1, and then a little bit more intense commercial, things like auto repair, bowling alleys, furniture stores, hotel stores, etc., and then brings in conditional uses, things like bars, convenience stores, packaged liquors, laboratories, that kind of thing in the C2. Our C3 is our highway commercial district, so think of things along I-44, along Highway 63 in particular. Everything, again, in the C1 or a C2 zone, including things like lumber yards, feed stores, tire repair, tattoo parlors. We even allow, and this was one of those things required by state law that we couldn't exempt out of our community, SOBs stand for sexually oriented businesses. So we allow in C3 zones sexually oriented businesses, as we're required to, but we put a condition of a 700-foot spacing between churches, schools, daycares, and in that case, we even did it on residential zone property. So we have very narrow markets in Rolla for sexually oriented businesses. That wording would not be permissible under the wording under Amendment 2 to have that kind of restrictive language. And then our last district is perhaps the most interesting one. It's the CC, or Central District, Center City District. Because you think of the quaint shops in the downtown area with pubs and restaurants and shops, but in essence, ours is cumulative. We allow everything that's allowed in C1, C2, and C3, with the exception of mobile home parks, in your downtown area. So downtowns, by their nature, tend to be an eclectic mix of types of business uses. And so it would be unusual to say you can't do something in your central city district that you are allowing in a C2 or C3 district, because our zoning districts are building on one another. So just wanted to touch on that general description of the districts as they are in Rolla currently. And then I want to put this little table together, what we're proposing in the districts. So across the top margins, we've shown everything from our RR, which is rural residential, all the way up to the M2, which is our heavy manufacturing. And we include the 4 classifications. Again, there's a medical marijuana dispensing facility, a medical marijuana testing facility, medical marijuana infused products facility, and a medical marijuana cultivation facility. We are proposing, where you see the X's, that means they're not allowed in those zones. Whether you see a C, we're allowing them under the draft ordinance as a conditional use, and when you see a P, we're allowing those under a permitted use. So the 2 that are certainly the most relevant for us is, again, the dispensing facility. We're proposing a C2 under a conditional use, a permitted use in C3, and the permitted use in CC, and not allowed in the manufacturing districts. And then the other more intense issues of testing, infused products, and cultivation, we're allowing them in the heavier either commercial zones or manufacturing zones in the case of the cultivation. So it's just a summary of what our ordinance is including. So we want to get into sort of zero in now on what is most likely the real issue for us, which is, again, the spacing requirements of those 4 classifications. The most obviously critical is the dispensing issue. What we're proposing is 300 foot from any then existing school, child care center, or church, down from the amendment stated 1,000 foot, but taking advantage of the provision in that amendment that allows for a local government to go less than that. We're also proposing a 500 foot spacing between dispensaries. Now, a lot of cities aren't doing that. What it's really saying is that you're really not congregating or aggregating these if we have 2 or 3 just in the downtown area on the same block. 500 foot spacing would be about a 3-block distance in our downtown area, so the idea was to sort of spread them out, because the whole point, as we saw from Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, is to make these accessible throughout the community for patients. And so you really do want to encourage one on Kings Highway, perhaps one downtown, perhaps one in Forum Plaza, as opposed to necessarily having all 3 in one particular area. It's part of the issue they're going at with access. We didn't propose any additional restrictions on the lab testing facility, because it is a very regulated, restricted lab, and labs are permitted use in many of our commercial zones. The infused products, we're proposing 500 feet, but again, quite frankly, between infused product and the cultivation facilities where we kept 1,000, they're not likely to be in the Rolla market. Those are going to be in the urban centers because there's so few of them throughout the state of Missouri. But I wanted to reinforce that Amendment 2 provides that 1,000-foot spacing, so it will be entirely within Planning and Zoning Commission's authority in recommending, and City Council's authority to exercise, to stipulate the 1,000-foot spacing. So what does that really look like in the downtown area? And we didn't do this modeling for the whole community. We have something like 30 churches throughout the community. We've got a dozen schools that would qualify. We've probably got a dozen daycares, and that would take another couple weeks for us to be able to do that kind of mapping for the whole city to really determine where those space requirements might apply. But my proposal initially was 300 foot, and so the first map that I presented to the City Council on Monday and sharing with you is a 300 foot spacing from the 5 or 6 facilities protected under the existing amendment. So what that really shows is about half of Pine Street, really the southern half, from about 8.5 block down to 6th Street, would be an eligible area for a dispensary. There's a little bit on the northern boundary on Pine Street, and as you sort of go to the east a little bit. But at 300 feet, we pretty much say nothing can occur within the Rolla Street, Main Street, Park Street elements, and really nothing can occur on the Cedar Street, Olive Street coordinates. So it's a fairly narrow area. When City Council saw that, and I was really asking Council not to weigh in on that because it needs to go through the public hearing process, but they did express a little reservation or concern over that. and they asked if I would just look at the 100 feet. So the next map here is a 100-foot spacing from those same 5 or 6 protected facilities or classifications. And you can see under that model that at 100 feet, really almost all of Pine Street except for one consistent block or a block and a half between 9th and 10th would be permitted dispensary uses. It goes over to Rolla Street, certainly covers everything around the railroad tracks, and 8th and 7th and sort of down to 6th Street. You're still in the city center district, but would be permitted. If we were to show a map at 1,000 foot, and no one just asked me to do that, I could pretty much assure you nothing in the downtown area would be permitted at 1,000 foot.
Yeah.
Now, at 7 foot, would we leave a little corridor? Yeah, possibly, but really once you get beyond, I would say, the 300, you have in essence taken most of the feasible area out of the downtown area. And remember, those same regulations and apply for the other uses, whether they're going in C2 or C3, throughout the rest of the community, along Kings Highway, where we have at least one mosque on Kings Highway that at 1,000 foot would eat up much of the Kings Highway run. The 300 foot or 100 foot level, it would not have quite that impact. So that is the PowerPoint. I apologize for not making copies of this. It dawned on me I should have given you all copies. So I will make copies available, and we'll get these out to you. Certainly anybody in the public is happy to produce copies of those. But I thought now we could just sort of touch on the ordinance itself, what we're proposing there. And what I did on the ordinance might be easier to use the overhead, if you could.
Okay.
Can you switch that?
John, as far as daycares, it has to be a licensed daycare by the state of Missouri.
Correct.
It's worded differently in a couple sections, but it's mostly, and that limits, someone just babysitting for their friends' kids, they don't have a certain number of kids, they don't have to have a license.
Correct. So a lot of home daycares wouldn't necessarily be required if they
No,
had
so
under.
it'd just be licensed, which.
It's supposed to be licensed over 4 children, but
Yeah.
it doesn't always happen.
But that,
So just kind of touching through the ordinance, and again, I wanted, it's not easy to see that with the glare. We did include definitions and sort of tightened up those definitions for child daycare centers, churches. We described what the marijuana definitions are. We gave the definitions for the infused products, cultivation facilities, the dispensary facilities, and the infused products. Again, those are less issues for us. The real crux comes into the bottom in section 2, dealing what our proposal is a conditional use for C2 for the medical marijuana dispensaries. So that would be a conditional use in C2, a permitted use in C3, and a permitted use in the city central district. Currently, a pharmacy would be allowed as a conditional use in C1. So we are drawing a distinction between this particular type of pharmacy and standard pharmacies in the community. And then we are in additional uses in section 3. We're saying a conditional use in the highway commercial district, the infused products facility would be allowed, which would then mean that it would be permitted in the manufacturing zones. And we are clarifying, and it's just sort of reaffirming, again, we don't think this is going to happen, that the marijuana cultivation facilities and marijuana-infused products are permitted in our M1 manufacturing districts. So in the bulk of the key elements of the ordinance really fall under the standards that we're providing, and under the medical marijuana dispensaries. The issues that we're really looking at, again, is that spacing, hours of operation, and there's a fencing element that gets in on the larger facilities, but are probably less concerned for us. So I thought it might be just as easy, Chairman, just to see if the board has some specific questions on what's being proposed, and then we could go from there.
okay. The liquor is 100 feet, but seems to work fairly well, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah, so aside from the sexually oriented businesses, which have a 700-foot spacing, the only other spacing that we have anywhere in our regulations is in a liquor license establishment. State law establishes that 100-foot and allows local government to have gone up to as much as 300-foot. Rolla chose not to do that. So ours is a 100-foot basis. And so you're hearing that something relative to that would make sense on the dispensary as well.
that appears to work and haven't been any problems that I'm aware of.
We've had a couple of conflicts where the license went in, and we have a provision that allows that church, school, or daycare to send a letter in support of it. And so Russ and Rena's on 6th Street actually got a letter from an adjoining church saying they were not objecting to the penetration of that 100-foot spacing. This wouldn't allow for that kind of language, but we have that in our liquor license regulations.
Any questions from commissioners?
One comment that we just got this evening, that Waynesville also is, I think, working on it tonight or whatever, but they're proposing 1,000 foot.
Okay, I hadn't heard that. And really, every city out there is working on theirs now. Every city out there is trying to get these things done in the next 60 days. So we're going to be seeing lots of cities with their numbers now, and everyone's sort of waiting to see what number seems to be working. So.
Having been on the council, though, when we put in the 750 foot for the SOB, if you draw circles, and it pretty well, that to me, that someone could claim that would be a hindrance to implementing I think the 1,000 foot's a hindrance, but I don't think they thought that through in the small city, in St. Louis or Kansas City.
Right.
But in some of your real small towns, I don't know whether you could even have one in.
Right. And yet the
Commercial
amendment says that you can't prohibit them, so that's where the authority is then to do something that's more unique or specific to your community and do less.
Any other comments, questions?
Why would 1,000 foot make any difference?
Well,
That's
if you-
what the state law is.
If you draw your circles, you're not gonna have any properties at all that qualify.
Yeah, they won't be able to exist within the community. They could be on the outskirts of the community probably, but none of the retail industry inside the city will they be able to be in.
So
I wouldn't.
We're not supposed to be burdensome in this either. We're supposed to allow them to have an
that was the
opportunity
state law.
to.
Yeah, it's not the state law, it's a constitutional
recommendation.
amendment. It establishes 1,000, but it goes with us. I wouldn't say that there's no areas within
It'd be
C2 and
very-
C3, but
very
it would be very, very few that would do it, and it would certainly not cover the downtown area.
Right.
John, did you state a retail business probably could not do a dispensary? They probably have to shut down a retail business to open up.
They're gonna have to separate that from it. So I'm not saying you're gonna have to shut it one down, but you're gonna have to separate that into separate building front, access it, all independent from general retail area.
Doesn't that just kind of make the whole downtown unacceptable for a dispensary?
No, because most of them, at least if you model off of what other states have done, they're not, the dispensaries are not very big. I mean, a storefront would be what you would really need. You dedicate a storefront to the prescription-based medical marijuana program.
It'd have to be a separate interest to the retail store, so they're gonna have to.
Yeah.
And John, did you say that if we went with the 750 feet, that there would only be a very small area of the downtown area that would be?
It would be a very small, I mean, if you look at the 300 feet and you sort of double the size, that would only get you to 600 feet. So if you can, I guess, could we switch back over? I'm sorry.
It's not allowed in R1, R2, or R3, so.
Perfect, thank you.
You rule out all the R1, R2, and R3 on your map, and then you limit to 750 feet.
Yeah, so if you look at the 300-foot spacing and you doubled that, that would get you to 600 feet and give you a pretty good idea that even at that point, you wouldn't have much in the city central district. And at 750, you would virtually take out all of the area. I can't say there wouldn't be a corner here or there, but by and large. So a lot of I think the fundamental question is, it's going to be allowed in city central district because it's a cumulative. If it's allowed in C3, it's going to be allowed in city center. It's going to be whether that spacing is going to really, in effect, not allow that dispensary to go in that particular district. And that's entirely within the city's authority to do that. We're not required not to allow it, to have it in the downtown area. We can prohibit that by that spacing requirement, but we just impact then where else in the community they could go.
John? Maybe all of us got 4 or 5 emails today, and there's really nobody against dispensing medical marijuana. They're concerned about property values. You want to comment on that?
I don't know that we know here. If you look at other states that have done it, I don't know. What you've probably seen is a increased activity, economic activity around those areas. I have a son that's in Fort Collins, Colorado. they're very nondescript there. It's recreational marijuana, so they've even got more of them than what we would have here. You would be hard pressed to look at downtown Fort Collins and see a negative impact. In fact, it's a very vital area, lots of pedestrians, a lot of bicycle, a lot of economic activity. So it would be hard to really be able to say that this is going to affect property values. The medical marijuana facility is a significant investment in that building, not just in the building, but in the mechanisms to manage it, to run it, to operate it. It's going to require an infusion of dollars to make that work in a space in downtown. So I personally have a hard time seeing how it's going to have an adverse impact on it. Now, that's not addressing the larger issues of what happens down the road if recreational marijuana becomes an issue and you have a half dozen of these in the downtown area. That might be a different conversation. But from a dispensing pharmaceutical type facility, hard to see how that's going to have an economic impact. I think an adverse economic impact on the downtown.
John, would C2, if we did a conditional thing on C2, that would open up quite a few areas outside of downtown that would have excellent access, excellent parking, no big issues.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, and so
there's a lot of them.
Yeah, in fact, I passed out those maps specifically so you can get a feel for the C2 areas there. If you think of the C2 areas, you're going to see mostly Kings Highway, Forum Plaza area, and then a lot of sort of pocket areas, some areas out 72. So C2 is it's by its title is the general retail area closer to neighborhoods. So most of what we see on 63, most of what we see on Rolla West is all C3. It's that highway commercial frontage. So C2 is not a huge area overall. It's just these pockets throughout the community. But yes, short of them being close to a church, school, or daycare facility, there are lots of little pockets around of C2 that would work.
Just off the top of your head, if we had went to a C2 with a buffer of some sort, that would eliminate a few, but not a great many?
Yeah, so the best example I could give, the largest C2 area we have is Kings Highway. Think of that entire stretch of Kings Highway. It's almost all entirely C2. There is a mosque about a third of the way up on that. So, whatever that spacing that's agreed to, 100 foot, 300 foot, 500, 1,000, you block that out on Kings Highway. So there's, with a reasonable distance, there's plenty of area on Kings Highway that would work.
Not anymore?
I don't think so.
The other thing we could do, and we're proposing that we do this as a conditional use in C2, we could allow, if we wanted to open up more area, but move it from the downtown, we could go conditional use in C1 and a permitted use in C2. That's what our pharmacies currently operate under. But my proposal was to be a little more conservative than that.
If 60% of our voters approved this in Phelps County, shouldn't we work to make it reasonable for them to get to it, or someone to get to it, or some relative to get to it, than try to be so restrictive that no one can get to it?
Well, that's what the amendment specifically says, that you are going to work for access for these facilities, for dispensaries.
Any other questions or comments?
So we'll be here, and then after the public hearing, we can follow up with any discussion.
Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments before we open public hearing? If not, we'll officially open the public hearing. Please, anybody wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Please try to limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes and try not to say what someone else has already said.
Don Morse, 208 Victoria Lane. Possibly this was already answered. I couldn't hear for sure back there. But I'm just curious as to why there is a need for this facility to be downtown. We're talking about a pharmacy. The major pharmacies, other major pharmacies that we have in town certainly aren't downtown. You, sir, just mentioned the fact of accessibility for people. There's been parking problems downtown for quite some time, and that, I don't see that putting something of this nature downtown is going to make it highly accessible to folks. So I'm curious as to why there is a need for this facility to go downtown.
Jonathan Hines, 621 Salem Avenue. My comment is, if you're going to err on the side of making it larger, not smaller, because you can always reduce it later if you decide that reduced is warranted, but you can never expand the exclusion because they'll already be grandfathered in. And I kind of agree with Don. I don't know why it needs to be in downtown, but people of the state did vote to pass this. I do believe that medical marijuana is beneficial. I'm only commenting on the zoning and the distances. I would err on the side of larger, not smaller. So 500, 600 feet. Hell, I'd even go with 1,000 that the state recommends. But our town is small, and this is something that does provide benefit to people, so I'd go with 500 feet.
Dale Wands, it's been a long time since I've been here. 606 Penny Lane. But almost every time I've been here, parking has always been an issue. You have an opportunity now to avoid creating more parking problems downtown. I would recommend 1,000 feet at least. There seems to be a bias for downtown. Why, I don't know. But if it's a pharmacy or medical marijuana, surely they can drive someplace. So to me, you have an opportunity now to correct, or at least not add to, the parking situation as well.
Thank you.
Hello, Kim Morgan. My actual physical address, 1121 Sycamore. More importantly, I own the business at 116 West 8th Street. I'm a proud member of the Rolla Downtown Business Association and our beautiful buildings downtown. I'm a part of a group that spends a lot of hours and a lot of money working on our downtown spaces. It's very important to us, to me, and to us as a group, that it's a family-friendly area. We bring festivals. We bring lots and lots of people to the downtown area. We give money. We give time, and I feel like this is not an area that should have this type of a business in it. If you look at the zoning that you're talking about with the 300 feet, that also leaves the Kaleidoscope, the Boy Scouts of America, the Ozark Actors Theater, which is really important to me, and is a lot of children-centric businesses. Even if we talk about churches and schools and such, daycares, you're leaving other businesses unprotected if you go with the 300 feet. The Rolla Downtown Business Association would ask that you please consider the 1,000 feet. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Hearing none, we'll officially close the public hearing. Mr. Butts, would you like to?
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
The only thing I would add is, the other thing that we were proposing in here is also to limit the times wherever it goes, whatever zoning it goes to, and we're proposing 8 AM. They can operate 8 AM to 8 PM, Monday through Thursday and Sunday, and that would be extended to 11 PM. Some communities are just letting these be dictated by the business model that they're adopting and going 24/7. That just doesn't seem reasonable to me, but that can be amended. So that's one of those other things that we have the authority to regulate or restrict here.
So we need to recommend a zoning classification for all four of the facilities, and we need to recommend hours of operation.
Yes, and I
Need
mean,
to
there's a
recommend
proposal for that you have, but yeah, so I would suggest any changes that you want to make, that you make off of that draft
Off that
ordinance.
draft,
Yeah.
okay.
John, you said Monday through Thursday, 8 to 8?
Monday through Thursday, 8 AM to 8 PM, and Sunday, and then that would be extended to 11 PM on Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday for 11. Okay, thank you.
Why did you include Sunday, not
Because,
Saturday?
Fridays and Saturdays are just extending those hours there, but if you think of somebody that's needing prescription, the other places are operating on Sundays for the most part, so available Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday for the standard hours, and then Friday and Saturday for the extended hours. I mean, we could say that you can't operate on a Sunday, but we wouldn't do that on other businesses, would not allow them to not operate on a Sunday. We have the authority to do that, we just don't do that.
Are there any pharmacies open on Sunday?
Oh, yeah, all of
Are
them.
there?
Not all of them.
No, not all of them.
Not the, I don't think the
Well,
independent
six
ones
of
are.
them, but,
Yeah.
Walgreens, CVS.
And they've all got the right to choose to do that. I
Yeah.
mean, that's, I guess, what it comes down to. Are we going to restrict them and say you can't, or you just let the business model decide
Yeah,
that?
that's what they'd said.
I heard several comments about family-friendly something. And if they were open to 8 o'clock in the evening, that's a lot of times when families are out doing whatever they do. And I'm just wondering how that would affect those people that, walk by these facilities or whatever, taking their families out. I've heard a lot of comments about when their kids and them are walking by a facility, and it familiarizes them with this issue. I'm with Jonathan. I appreciate that marijuana is a beneficial thing, and it's a good thing. It's how we allow this to be presented in our community is what I'm looking at. What it does to the quality of life in the community. Like that it's there, that people can access it, people can use it. That's fine. There's a lot of places they have excellent access to it. No problem with parking. Downtown right now is an issue up till 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, and, which is a good thing, I guess. If you can parallel park. That's just my issue.
John, I watched the city council meeting on Monday, and you guys talked a little bit about the signage. Could you kind of refresh my memory on what signage these facilities were allowed to have on them?
Well, we have the authority to regulate the signage, but we have not adopted any additional signage beyond our sign regulations that were just updated 3 or 4 months ago. So, they'd be able to put a sign on the front exterior, you can put it on the inside of the window, but it'll be limited by the number and sizing and all of that. No different than any other retail.
Thank you.
John, I've received a lot of phone calls, emails in the last 4 days, and all of the concerns that have been voiced here are all of the concerns that I have also heard from the general public, mainly about the fact that we have worked really hard to get our downtown area to be accessible for a lot of people and built up that. It was brought to my attention that 25 years ago when one of our merchants bought her building, The sidewalks literally rolled up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There was no downtown business per se. The association has worked very hard to get that changed, and I think they have been successful. And I think that's a good thing for Rolla's image and what we've done. But I've had young people who have small children who are talking to me about Kaleidoscope, Scoops, and having their children being walked in front of a medical marijuana dispensary and having to make explanations of that. I agree, a lot of people, it is a necessary situation for a lot of people to have a better quality of life. However, I would like to see us maybe figure out some way that that can be made available, but not necessarily at the detriment of other businesses in the downtown area and or the general public who frequent those facilities. I'm not sure how we go about that, but I guess that's our job and we'll figure it out here in a few minutes. But I do want it to be known that there are people who have been very vocal about this over the last 4 days. As I said, numerous emails, numerous phone calls with me explaining we just have to work through it the best way we can. So I've had my say.
John, Mr. Hines' comment resonates with me because err on the side of caution, you can always change the boundary.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now what that number is, 500, 600, I don't know.
Yeah, and really what we're proposing here isn't saying that we're gearing these towards downtown. We're gearing these towards conditional use in C2 areas, all C3 areas, and CC being the next progression in our commercial uses. So that's already provided. It covers lots of the area. It's just going to be impacted by that distance requirement.
You're only talking 2% of the population that's going to use this, right?
The state's estimate is 2 to 3% of the population.
2%. So that's, you're not talking to a lot of people.
2,600 people, 3,000 people in Phelps County.
And most of the time, you're not going to notice them coming and going. I mean, it's going to be.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that this is a high turnover kind of location and facility, and quite frankly, we think traffic congestion and parking problems are a good thing, right? If you had space always available, that's a bad sign that you don't have any economic activity going. So, there's certainly adjacent parking lots to our downtown areas, and if we're going to approach it this way, we've been concerned saying any new business in the downtown area is not welcome. That's not the message we're trying to say at all. We'd like to see all those storefronts, open and operating with some legal proper business. So.
Also, if we limit the time that's available, someone working would not be able to get their prescription, which is similar to a medical prescription that you get at the pharmacy.
Yeah.
I would hate to see someone suffer because we're so restrictive. So.
And the other thing I guess I should have pointed out is that you're not allowed to consume medical marijuana in public, so you cannot take your medicine or prescription in this facility. You have to take this, then transfer it to your home where you take your prescription. So you're not going to see it on the street per se, but certainly it's a storefront, and they'll do advertising as a storefront like most of the other businesses there.
So like a pharmacy can do a delivery, they're not going to be allowed to do a delivery.
No.
They're going to have to come there.
No delivery, no mail order. Other states allow that, but Missouri doesn't.
You're not even allowed to have more than one customer pass the checkpoint unless you have more than one employee, I think.
Yeah, I'm not.
You have to have one-on-one all the time. All the regs are on the Department of Health and Senior Services, and I think public comment, they're still taking them till tomorrow. Yeah. So if you want to get in on the regs from the state point, you can contact her somehow.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm looking at the center district, and I'm looking at what could be available at 300 feet. And I'm thinking, if I was wanting to open up a dispensary, knowing there's congestion downtown, knowing the money I'm going to have to put into it before I even open my doors, that's the last place I want to be.
Good news for US Bank and Ford.
We've had, I'm gonna guess, I've taken a half dozen calls from either real estate people or prospective business folks interested in this. And they're interested in downtown, they're interested in other commercial corridors, they're just wanting to know where the rules are gonna permit them to go. So there are interested businesses, both from Rolla and outside of Rolla, looking to look at our market, whether that's C2, C3, or CC.
And even with this map at 300 feet, you put one anywhere that's allowed, and it's the only one that's going to be downtown, because we also have the 500 feet from any other dispensary.
Well, we have to adopt that. but
Well,
yes,
we adopt that,
adopt
but if that stays on there, you're only going to have one downtown anyway. That's all you can have.
I mean, it might be possible to be at the lowest boundary and somehow be in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The idea behind the 500 was to make sure that they get dispersed a little bit more throughout the community.
But I agree, 300 feet downtown is too small. 500 feet is probably better.
Yeah, it's entirely up to the commission to make that recommendation. And I would tackle all those just as a motion to amend the draft ordinance.
Now, were you saying 500 from certain facilities or
Yeah.
500
500
separating the
from all
two?
the daycare, the schools.
Okay.
Yeah, just add another 200 feet to the circle.
Yeah, yeah. And then 500 between dispensaries?
Yeah. Because we can't just distinguish between one zone and the other. It's 500 feet everywhere or 300 feet everywhere.
Okay.
And John, would, if in a C2, that regulation of 500 feet, would that protect those residential neighborhoods somewhat more or not?
Well, the 500-foot doesn't extend for residential areas. Yeah. So that wouldn't provide an additional buffer for a residential area.
Right.
Yeah.
The state will approve the site regardless. They'll make a determination. They also have pro and con. I mean, it's just because you have a site that meets all the requirements and you fill out the application, if they don't like what you have, then they can disapprove it or approve it.
Sure, they approve the business model, the investment, what's involved with it, the zoning, the location of it, not the zoning, but the location of it, all that's a part of that, their due diligence, so. But they'll defer to every city on what they adopt for the regulations.
So just because something qualifies, it may not materialize. So
Right.
it's highly regulated.
So how do we want to tackle this, one at a time?
I
Start with the zoning
We got
part of
close.
it, you think?
I'm open to any kind of motion you want to make, so as long as we cover all the,
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Do you want to do it one at a time, or do you want to do it bundled as everything? The hours, the distance, and the zoning, or you want to just do zoning, distances, and then hours separate? How you want to attack it?
Unless you're going to recommend it just as it is, I would tackle them each as a separate motion.
Okay. So if we don't do it just as you presented it, then we have to do it as a separate motion, okay?
Yeah.
What's the board's pleasure?
I don't care.
Sounds like the biggest sticking point is the distances.
Distance.
So we've got to come to some sort of a agreement on that, I would say.
500 feet?
Throw it out there. So everybody's
I'll make a
done.
motion to distance 500 feet. Recommend that.
For all,
For every, it has to be for everything.
Oh. Now, is that also between dispensaries?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Second.
have a motion and a second. Mr. Jordan, Mr. Smith. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Jordan,
Yes.
Eberly,
No.
Bowie,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Monty Shields,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Stephen Shields.
Yes.
And just to clarify, that's just on the dispensary, because we have 1,000 foot in the other, and you're not proposing we lower that. So we'll stay with 1,000 on the cultivation and the infused products. So that's just on the dispensary, okay?
Okay.
Dispensary and the facility lab, right?
Yeah.
Both of those would be raised to 500, correct?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-1.
Okay, thank you. We need to address the zoning.
I propose we present it as stated.
Okay, what's handed out in our packet.
Correct.
You make that motion?
Make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the zoning as presented in the packet that was distributed, which lists all the zonings for each classification. Any questions or comments? Let's do another roll call vote, please.
Everly,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Monty Shields,
Yes.
Stephen Shields,
Yes.
Schmidt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Have we covered everything?
No time.
The hours of operation.
Hours of operation.
Can I ask a quick question? Who made the second? Okay. Thank you.
So again, we're proposing 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday and Sunday, and extending those hours to 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. Do a motion to amend those or proceed as presented.
John, can I ask why the extension for Friday and Saturday till 11 p.m.? Just for convenience of people?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that other than that, just.
Some people may drive some distance after work or something to get to one of these if they need to have a prescription filled.
My guess is the market will dictate it to them anyway. If they're not doing any business past 8 o'clock, they're closed at 8 o'clock those 2 days anyway.
I mean, that was my thought. I mean, I didn't really know why
Right.
we needed to have it, I mean, 8 to 8.
It gives them
It
the
allow,
opportunity.
they could actually do less, but we wouldn't allow them to go longer than
We
that.
give them the
so.
opportunity to, but odds are, whatever the business is, it's gonna dictate it. If I'm a business owner and I'm not doing business from 9 to 11, I'm not gonna be open from 9 to 11, so, you just give them that opportunity.
That was a little bit the comment the council had. There was some feedback. Why regulate that at all? Let the business dictate those hours themselves. Seemed like some reasonable hour restrictions made sense.
You want to make a motion to the hours?
I'll make a motion that we make it 8 to 8, 7 days a week. Second.
Motion to make it 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock, 7 days a week. Any comments or questions? Let's do another roll call vote.
Stephen Shields,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Monty Shields,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Eberly,
No.
Anderson,
Yes.
Bowie.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-1.
Yeah, that pretty well covered it, I think, didn't it, John?
Yeah, we had some issues in here like razor wire required on the infused products in the cultivation facilities, but quite frankly, I I think those are okay because they're not likely to happen, so.
Well, they're required on the cultivation if it's outside, right?
Yeah, it was the height of it and all that, so,
Have a motion to accept everything else as is.
yeah, as amended.
Yeah. You want to make that motion?
Sure.
Okay. What about- Anderson made a motion and second by Bowie that we accept all the other regular things that were recommended in the handout. Is that
As amended.
other than the exceptions?
Yeah.
All those in favor of that say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passed unanimously. I don't get votes. So. Okay, thank you. We have no new business. We have no old business. The chairperson has nothing to report, and we have no outstanding committees. Mr. Flowers, do you have anything else that we need to?
I have nothing.
Lot going on in town. They're building everywhere.
I suspect that you'll see us more often.
Okay, anybody in the audience wish to speak to the commission regarding planning and zoning? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you. You guys are a lot more conservative, huh?
I didn't think I'd get 1,000.